She was just driving home from work when the blue lights flashed behind her, cutting through the darkness like a warning she couldn't ignore. Captain Sarah Williams had spent 15 years investigating corrupt cops, but she never expected to become their target. What started as a routine traffic stop on a quiet suburban street quickly turned into the worst mistake of Officer Bradley's career. He thought he was pulling over just another black woman he could intimidate and humiliate. But the badge hidden in her wallet wasn't just any badge, it was the one that could end his career forever. And when she finally revealed who she really was, the look of terror in his eyes told her everything she needed to know about the kind of cop he truly was. The clock on Sarah Williams' dashboard read 11:43 p.m. as she navigated the quiet streets of Riverside Heights, an upscale neighborhood where she rarely saw patrol cars this late at night. She was exhausted, her shoulders aching from another 14-hour day spent reviewing misconduct files and interviewing witnesses who were brave enough to speak out against corrupt officers. Her briefcase in the passenger seat contained 3 active cases that would likely end careers by the end of the week. As the head of internal affairs for the Metropolitan Police Department, Sarah carried the weight of justice on her shoulders every single day. Her phone buzzed with a text from her 17-year-old daughter Maya. "Mom, when are you coming home? I finished my essay and want to show you." Sarah smiled, one of the few genuine moments of happiness in her otherwise heavy day. Maya was everything to her. Brilliant, determined, and completely unaware of how dangerous her mother's job really was. Sarah had made enemies within her own department, officers who saw her as a threat to their brotherhood of silence. She was 3 blocks from home when the blue lights appeared in her rearview mirror. At first, Sarah assumed it was a colleague recognizing her unmarked sedan, maybe offering a late-night escort through the neighborhood. But as she slowed down and the patrol car remained behind her with lights flashing, she realized this wasn't a friendly gesture. This was an actual traffic stop. Sarah pulled over to the curb, her mind immediately shifting into professional mode. She had conducted thousands of investigations, interviewed countless officers, and she knew exactly how these encounters were supposed to go. Officer Tom Bradley stepped out of his patrol car with the swagger of someone who believed his badge made him untouchable. At 34, Bradley had 12 years on the force and a reputation among his peers as someone who didn't take any nonsense from anyone. What his fellow officers didn't always hear about were the complaints that regularly landed on Sarah's desk, allegations of excessive force, racial profiling, and intimidation tactics that pushed the boundaries of police procedure. Bradley approached the driver's side window, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness and deliberately shining directly into Sarah's eyes. He made no attempt to dim it or adjust the angle, a classic intimidation technique that Sarah had seen documented in dozens of misconduct cases. "License and registration," Bradley commanded without any greeting or explanation for the stop. His tone was sharp, aggressive, designed to immediately establish dominance. Sarah remained calm, her hands visible on the steering wheel. "Good evening, officer. May I ask what this stop is for?" Bradley's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to questions, especially from black women driving expensive cars through white neighborhoods. "License and registration. Now, don't make me ask again." "I understand you want my documents," Sarah replied evenly, "but as a citizen, I have the right to know why I'm being stopped." The flashlight beam moved closer to her face. "You were speeding." "I was driving 28 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone," Sarah said, her voice steady but firm. "I'd like to see your radar reading." Bradley's expression darkened. This wasn't going according to his usual script. Most people, especially black women alone at night, became compliant and afraid when he used his intimidation tactics. But this woman was calm, articulate, and clearly educated. It made him angry. "Step out of the vehicle," Bradley ordered, his hand moving toward his service weapon in what Sarah recognized as a deliberate threat display. "On what grounds?" Sarah asked, still keeping her hands visible. "I said step out of the vehicle now." Bradley's voice rose to a shout. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Sarah knew she was witnessing textbook misconduct. Everything about this stop was illegal. The lack of reasonable suspicion, the escalating aggression, the implied threat. As an internal affairs captain, she had the authority to end this officer's career with a single report. But she also knew that revealing her identity too early might cause Bradley to panic and make the situation even more dangerous. She slowly reached for her door handle. "I'm going to step out of the vehicle. My movements will be slow and deliberate." As Sarah stood beside her car, Bradley moved closer, invading her personal space in another classic intimidation move. "Hands on the hood, spread your legs." "Officer, I need to inform you that I'm recording this interaction," Sarah said calmly, nodding toward the dashboard camera she always kept running. Bradley's eyes flashed with anger. "Turn that off right now." "I have the legal right to record police interactions," Sarah replied. "Not when you're being detained for suspicious activity," Bradley lied smoothly. "Turn it off or I'll consider it obstruction of justice." Sarah recognized the threat for what it was, a desperate attempt to avoid accountability. She had seen this pattern hundreds of times in her investigations. Officers who knew they were crossing the line but believed they could intimidate citizens into silence. "What suspicious activity?" Sarah asked. Bradley stepped closer, his breath hot against her face. "A black woman driving an expensive car through this neighborhood at midnight. That's suspicious enough for me." The words hung in the air like a confession. Sarah felt a familiar mixture of anger and sadness wash over her. After 15 years in internal affairs, she still felt the sting of racism from her own colleagues. But she also felt something else: determination. This officer had just sealed his own fate. "Officer Bradley," Sarah said quietly, reading his nameplate for the first time. Bradley blinked, surprised that she knew his name. "I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you," Sarah continued, her voice taking on an edge of authority that made Bradley step back instinctively. Something in her tone had changed. The calm compliance was still there, but underneath it was something harder, more dangerous. Sarah reached slowly into her jacket pocket, her movements deliberate and visible. "Keep your hands where I can see them," Bradley shouted, his hand moving to his weapon again. "My hands are visible, Officer Bradley," Sarah said calmly. "I'm reaching for my identification." She pulled out a leather wallet, flipped it open and held it up so that Bradley could see the badge and credentials inside. The streetlight illuminated the gold shield clearly. Metropolitan Police Department, Internal Affairs Division, Captain Sarah Williams. The color drained from Bradley's face as if someone had opened a valve. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again without any sound coming out. The swagger disappeared, replaced by the look of a man who had just realized he was standing at the edge of a cliff. "Captain Williams," Sarah said, her voice now carrying the full weight of her authority. "Internal Affairs Division. The same Captain Williams who has been investigating complaints about your conduct for the past 6 months." Bradley's hands began to shake. "Captain, this is Officer Bradley," Sarah continued, closing her wallet and returning it to her pocket. "You have just committed multiple violations of department policy and civil rights law. Would you like me to list them?" Bradley's training kicked in, but it was too late for procedure. "Captain, you initiated a traffic stop without reasonable suspicion," Sarah began, her voice clinical and precise. "You failed to identify yourself or explain the reason for the stop. You escalated the encounter unnecessarily, made racially motivated statements, threatened me with physical force, and attempted to prevent me from recording our interaction." Each word landed like a hammer blow. Bradley felt his career crumbling in real time. "Captain, please, I can explain." "The explanation is quite clear, Officer Bradley," Sarah said. "You saw a black woman driving through a white neighborhood and decided to exercise your authority based on racial profiling. The question now is, what are we going to do about it?" But here's where the story takes an even more shocking turn, because what Captain Williams discovered about Officer Bradley would expose corruption that reached far beyond a simple traffic stop. Bradley's mind raced, searching for any way to salvage the situation. He had heard stories about Captain Williams, how she was methodical, thorough, and completely immune to the brotherhood loyalty that usually protected officers from consequences. Internal affairs investigators were feared throughout the department, but Williams was in a class of her own. "Captain, I think there's been a misunderstanding," Bradley said, his voice now pleading rather than commanding. Sarah studied him with the analytical gaze of someone who had interrogated hundreds of officers. The only misunderstanding, Officer Bradley, is yours. You misunderstood who you were dealing with. She walked back to her car, retrieved her briefcase, and pulled out a manila folder. Since we're already here, let's discuss the complaints I've been investigating. Bradley's stomach dropped. He had suspected that Internal Affairs might be looking into him, but hearing it confirmed was like a death sentence. Mrs. Janet Morrison, Sarah read from the file, pulled over in this same neighborhood 3 months ago. You told her she didn't belong here and searched her car without consent. Bradley's mouth went dry. Marcus Johnson, age 19. You stopped him for looking suspicious while he was walking to his job at the grocery store. Forced him to lie face down on the sidewalk for 20 minutes while you searched for drugs that didn't exist. Captain, those were legitimate. Linda Foster, Sarah continued without acknowledging his interruption. Single mother driving home from her night shift as a nurse. You pulled her over and told her that women like her should be more careful about where they drive at night. With each name, Bradley felt the walls closing in. He had been careful, or so he thought. He never realized that someone was connecting the dots, documenting a pattern of behavior that would be impossible to explain away. 12 complaints in 18 months, Officer Bradley. All involving African American citizens. All following the same pattern of racial profiling and intimidation. Sarah closed the file and looked directly at him. But tonight, you made a critical error. You targeted someone who has the authority to do something about it. Bradley's legs felt weak. His career wasn't just ending, it was imploding in spectacular fashion. But worse than the professional consequences was the realization that his actions had caused real harm to real people. The names Sarah had read weren't just statistics, they were citizens he had terrorized because he believed his badge made him untouchable. What happens now? Bradley asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Now, Sarah said, walking back toward her car, you're going to follow me to the station. You're going to surrender your weapon and badge. And you're going to give a full statement about not just tonight's incident, but about every stop you've made that violated citizens' rights. And if I refuse? Sarah paused and turned back to him. Officer Bradley, you just conducted an illegal traffic stop on the head of Internal Affairs while being recorded. Refusing to cooperate would be the least of your problems. As they prepared to leave for the station, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Deputy Chief Martinez, her direct supervisor. Captain Williams, she answered. Sarah, I just got a call from dispatch about a traffic stop involving you and Officer Bradley. Is everything all right? Sarah glanced at Bradley, who was standing beside his patrol car looking like a man attending his own funeral. Deputy Chief, I'm going to need you to meet us at the station. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. How immediate? I'll be filing for Bradley's suspension tonight and requesting a full investigation into a pattern of civil rights violations. There was a pause. Sarah, are you saying? I'm saying we have a problem. It goes beyond one officer, and I think it's about to get a lot bigger. The drive to the station was surreal. Sarah led the convoy in her sedan while Bradley followed in his patrol car, probably making phone calls to union representatives and lawyers. She thought about the 12 citizens whose complaints she had investigated, people who had been victimized by someone sworn to protect them. Tonight, they would finally get justice. But as they pulled into the station parking lot, Sarah noticed something that made her pause. There were more cars there than usual for a midnight shift. Through the windows, she could see uniformed officers gathered in the main hallway, their body language tense and urgent. Her phone buzzed with a text from Deputy Chief Martinez. Sarah, we need to talk before you come inside. There's something you need to know about the Bradley situation. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. In 15 years of internal affairs work, she had learned to trust her instinct. And right now, every instinct was telling her that the corruption she had uncovered was about to reveal itself as something much larger and more dangerous than a single racist cop. She looked in her rearview mirror and saw Bradley on his phone, his conversation animated and urgent. The fear in his eyes had been replaced by something else, desperation, but also a kind of grim determination that suggested he wasn't planning to go down alone. Sarah Williams had spent her career taking down corrupt officers one case at a time. But as she sat in that parking lot, she realized she was about to walk into the biggest fight of her professional life. Because when corrupt cops feel cornered, they don't surrender quietly, they take everyone down with them. The question was how many officers were involved in this web of corruption, and how far up the chain of command did it go? Inside the station, Deputy Chief Martinez was pacing his office, his usually calm demeanor shattered by a phone call he had received 20 minutes earlier. The call had come from someone he hadn't expected to hear from, someone whose involvement in the Bradley situation changed everything. "Sir," his assistant knocked on the door. "Captain Williams just arrived with Officer Bradley." Martinez took a deep breath. "Send them to conference room and get me the chief on the phone immediately." As Sarah walked through the station, she noticed the unusual tension in the air. Officers who normally greeted her with professional courtesy now avoided eye contact. The night shift supervisor, Sergeant Reynolds, actually turned and walked in the opposite direction when he saw her coming. Something was very wrong. Conference Room A was typically used for formal interrogations and serious disciplinary meetings. As Sarah entered, she saw Deputy Chief Martinez sitting at the head of the table, his expression grim. Bradley took a seat across from him, his earlier fear now mixed with what looked almost like relief. "Captain Williams," Martinez began, "before we proceed with Officer Bradley's statement, there's something you need to understand about the scope of this situation." Sarah felt her investigator instincts activate. "What kind of scope?" Martinez slid a manila envelope across the table. 40 minutes ago, I received a call from Internal Affairs in 3 neighboring jurisdictions. They've all been investigating similar patterns of racial profiling and misconduct. The same patterns you've been documenting with Officer Bradley." Sarah opened the envelope and felt her breath catch. Inside were photos, incident reports, and witness statements from multiple police departments. The documentation was extensive, professional, and damning. "How long has this investigation been going on?" she asked. 6 months. Martinez replied. "A joint task force between Internal Affairs divisions, coordinated at the federal level." Sarah looked up sharply. "Federal level?" "The FBI Civil Rights Division has been monitoring police departments across the state for systematic civil rights violation. Your investigation into Officer Bradley became part of a much larger case." Bradley shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Captain, I think I should have a lawyer present." "You should," Martinez agreed, "because this isn't just about tonight's traffic stop anymore." Sarah felt the pieces clicking into place. "The complaints I've been investigating were part of a coordinated pattern of harassment targeting specific neighborhoods and communities," Martinez finished. "We believe there's an organized effort within multiple departments to intimidate and suppress minority communities through systematic abuse of police authority." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about one corrupt cop or even one corrupt department. It was about a network of officers who had weaponized their badges to terrorize citizens based on race. "How many officers are involved?" Sarah asked. Martinez looked at Bradley, then back at Sarah. "We estimate at least 40 officers across 5 departments. Possibly more." Bradley's face had gone pale again. "Captain, I need to tell you something. About tonight, about the stop. It wasn't random." Sarah felt ice in her veins. "What do you mean?" "I mean someone told me to watch for your car. Someone told me you'd be driving through that neighborhood tonight." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Sarah realized that her own investigation had been compromised, that someone within the department had been feeding information to the officers she was investigating. "Who told you?" Martinez demanded. Bradley looked around the room as if searching for escape routes. "I want immunity before I say anything else." "Officer Bradley," Sarah said, her voice deadly calm, "you're already facing federal civil rights charges. Cooperation is your only option for any kind of leniency." Bradley took a shaky breath. "Sergeant Reynolds, he said you'd been asking too many questions, getting too close to something big. He told me to find a reason to stop you, rattle you, make you back off." Sarah felt a surge of anger that she immediately channeled into cold professionalism. Sergeant Reynolds was a 20-year veteran with an exemplary record, or so she had thought. If he was involved in covering up systematic corruption, it meant the rot went deeper than anyone had imagined. What else did Reynolds tell you? Martinez asked. He said there were other captains in other departments asking the same kinds of questions. He said there was a list of people who needed to be discouraged from digging too deep. Sarah exchanged a glance with Martinez. A list meant organization. Organization meant conspiracy. Conspiracy meant this case was about to explode into something that would reshape multiple police departments. But the biggest shock was still coming, because the person behind the conspiracy was someone Sarah had trusted completely. Martinez's phone buzzed with an urgent message. He read it, and his expression darkened further. Captain Williams, Assistant Chief Patricia Hawkins, has just been arrested by federal agents. She's been identified as the primary coordinator of the harassment campaign. The room spun around Sarah as the full scope of the betrayal hit her. Patricia Hawkins had been her mentor, someone she had trusted with her career and her safety. She's been feeding information to the officers under investigation, Martinez continued, warning them about complaints and identifying internal affairs investigators who were getting too close to the truth. Bradley looked up with something approaching relief. Does this mean? It means you're still facing charges for civil rights violations, Sarah said sharply. But it also means you have an opportunity to help us take down a conspiracy that has victimized hundreds of citizens. Over the next hour, Bradley provided details about the network of corrupt officers and their systematic targeting of minority communities. The picture that emerged was of a shadow organization within multiple police departments, operating with protection from high-ranking officials. What happens now? Sarah asked. Martinez gathered the files spread across the table. Now we coordinate with federal investigators to take down the entire network. This operation is going to involve simultaneous arrests across 5 counties and 3 states. How many officers will be arrested? Our current count is 67 officers and 14 supervisors, Martinez said, but we expect the numbers to grow as more evidence comes to light. Sarah felt vindication and sadness. Her investigation had exposed systematic corruption, but it meant officers she had trusted were betraying everything the badge represented. Captain Williams, Martinez said, your work has been exemplary. Without your investigation and tonight's encounter, we might never have uncovered this conspiracy. As Sarah drove home at 3:47 a.m., she thought about her daughter Maya, who would wake up to a world where justice had taken a significant step forward. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Mom, I left my essay on the kitchen table. It's about heroes who fight for justice even when it's dangerous. Love you. Sarah smiled, tears mixing together. Maya had no idea her mother had just helped bring down one of the largest police corruption scandals in state history. When Sarah walked into her house, she found Maya's essay titled Real Heroes, the people who stand up when everyone else stays silent. Real heroes, Sarah thought, don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear badges and carry the weight of justice on their shoulders. 3 months later, the headline read, Federal Task Force Arrests 67 Officers in Multi-State Corruption Scandal. Sarah Williams didn't need recognition. She had something better. The knowledge that justice had been served and citizens could trust their police force again. The system had proved it could heal itself when good people refused to compromise with corruption. This story reminds us that justice doesn't always come easily, but it comes to those who refuse to give up the fight. If you believe in the power of standing up for what's right, even when it's dangerous, subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage and justice. Don't forget to hit the notification bell and let us know in the comments, what would you have done in Captain Williams' situation?